Hidden deep within the jungles of southern Mexico are the remnants of a mighty civilization. The descendants of one of the only Mayan groups that escaped the Spanish conquistadors still inhabit these forests. They are known as the Lacandon Maya. In 1960, Canadian explorer and photographer Colin Hannay traveled deep into the jungles of Chiapas in search of the Lacandon.
I had learned that the remnants of a great Maya civilization exist in the heart of this jungle. We suddenly came out into light and looked over a beautiful lake. They were waiting and expecting us. In some way or other, they knew we were coming.
In their small cabin perched on the cliffs above the Pacific Ocean, Colin Hannay's widow Shendra recalls his adventures.
Colin had been down on expeditions to Mexico for many years, and he'd heard about this group in the jungles. He'd heard from bush pilots about them, yet you couldn't reach them by plane. He and his young friend Arthur Paulson, the violinist, decided that they were going to do this. They were going to find these peoples. The whole experience was magical for both Colin and Arthur. It was like going to another planet. Here they were with an isolated group that was totally harmonious. Colin compared it to the civilization of 1960, you know, our big world, and he felt theirs was infinitely better. Colin and I had discussed so many times wanting to go back to see what had gone on since Colin was there. And yet, you know, time and life gets in the way and we kept putting it off. My goal when my husband passed away was to go back and to take the photographs with me, to give to them if they were still there, and to take the film that Colin took back to them, the way their lives were 40 years ago. This is a map of La Selva Lacandona, the Lacandon forest. The cartographer was Dr. Franz Blom. This dark area is La Selva Lacandona. It used to extend over most of the state of Chiapas. And here, hidden in the forests between Palenque and Yaxchilan, is Lake Naha.
The Lacandons still live deep in the jungle beside Lake Naha. Their houses now line the rough airstrip and gravel road, and modes of transport have changed. Kayum Mash was an infant when Colin Hannay visited his village. He began painting when he was just a small boy.
I used to paint because as a child, I liked the legends, the stories. I painted things and people in my father's door, and when they saw it, they said, "Who did that? It looks ugly." I didn't say it was me because I was afraid my father would hit me. One day he saw it was me. He said it was okay to do it. My father was the last Tohil, wise man, and I trusted him because he knew Hachakyum. And he followed his story all the way back from his ancestors.
Kayum's father would take the young boy to the ancient temples of Yaxchilan to pray to the Lacandon god, Hachakyum.
My father told us where the Hachuinik, the true people, came from. We come from clay. Hachakyum thought about making his people like clay dolls. He wanted to have people.
Historians have speculated about the origins of the Lacandon. They themselves believe they are the direct descendants from the last Mayan states to be invaded by the Spanish in 1697.
My father told me the story of when the Spaniards invaded, that they were bringing many problems and killing a lot of people. The Lacandons were running away, hiding. They were very afraid. Some Spaniards used to pass close to them on horseback, and they had many things, firearms to shoot people. They were dangerous, and it was they that killed all the people. We only had arrows, so it was better to hide and find refuge in the jungle.
For many years, centuries, the Lacandon remained hidden and isolated, living in small family groups deep in the jungle.
They had nowhere stable to live. They lived in many places. Each year they lived in a different place. They lived here for a while and enjoyed what they had, and then moved again to walk to another home. One day, old Chanquin arrived at the shores of Lake Naha, and along with friends started to build the houses. There were many trees full of everything, many animals, pheasant, a lot of tigers, a lot of tapirs, cojolitos, coyotes, and all sorts of wild animals. At that time, no one possessed the land, and it was all a big reserve that belonged to nobody. Then the chicleros entered the jungle and tapped the gum tree without any permission.
Ironically, in the 1920s and 30s, it was the Western taste for chewing gum that finally broke the isolation of the Lacandon. Chewing gum is made from the gum of the chicle tree, which grows in that area.
At that time, Gertrudis Duby Blom and Pancho Franz Blom arrived. Gertrudis Blom was wearing a pair of pants from the Mexican Revolution. The people were afraid of that and thought she was a military person with firearms. We didn't know. Gertrudis told us to not be afraid because she was coming here to learn, to be our friend. She would bring machetes, files, and other gifts which were very useful. Chanquin told her that they were friends. She told him that there would be more people coming to occupy the land, and that she would help them measure the piece of land, because if it was not measured, then people will come and displace them. My father asked her to please help.
Gertrude Duby, Trudy we called her, a Swiss-born horticulturalist, a brilliant photographer who came to Mexico just after the Second World War, and on assignment from the Mexican government, she traveled to Chiapas to discover how many Lacandon were in the jungles. And she landed at an airstrip at the same time as Dr. Franz Blom, the archaeologist, who had also, of course, traveled the forests, and they met on this jungle airstrip. They had a wonderful rapport, and later they were married. When Colin and Arthur got to San Cristobal, Chiapas, they met Franz Blom and Trudy. At the last minute, Trudy said, "Oh, I'm coming too." This apparently short distance on the map between San Cristobal to Lago Naha actually took days, up and down mountains, through ravines and creeks and crossing rivers to get to Lago Naha. Trudy was a fireball. Franz was very gentle, Franz Blom, very gentle. Trudy was dynamite, and they were great advocates for the Lacandon.
San Cristobal, Chiapas, the nearest city to the village of Naha. And in a quiet corner away from the busy streets is Nabalom, House of the Jaguar.
Nabalom used to be a monastery. And in 1951, Franz Blom and his wife Trudy made it into a haven for scholars to come who wanted to study the Maya, and for the Lacandon themselves to come and be safe when they came out of the jungle.
When I first came to Nabolom, I was around 12. I don't remember exactly the dates. I was a little bit scared. I didn't know the place. There were a lot of cars, a lot of people. It was the first time I'd been there. I wouldn't let my father go. If I got lost, I didn't know the place, so I was very close to my father all the time and couldn't let him go. Close, close, don't let go. We are together, my father said, and that's how it was. Nabolom has been very important for the Hachiwinik. Nabolom also gives shelter to the Lacandons that come here, because there is nowhere else to stay. Same for those that are sick. They come to Nabolom and get medical assistance.
Para curarse en doctor. Cuando vengo aquí, pues se siente
I feel sad when I come here and see the photographs of my father and my brothers, Chan King and King Murush, who passed away. They used to take Trudy in the cayucos. I get sad because of all the changes. Every time I come here, I miss them.
Old Chan King knew that changes were coming and foretold the future in his stories.
Achakyum is the god of the Hachiwinik. Achakyum created the Hachiwinik. Akianto created the tourists, French, all the people, Americans, Mexicans, everyone. Now the jungle is full of people. There will be nothing left when the jungle is over. Everything will be over. Same for you, for all the people. No lake, no sea. Everything will get dry. No more Hachiwinik, and no more of you. It will be the end.
These are the sacred god pots of the Lacandon, and we're really honored to have a set. Colin was able to help a baby who had gastroenteritis, and Colin had antibiotics in with him, and the baby was better, got better, and so they gave him these god pots. So I'm going to pack them very carefully. There were said to be 42 people in the village in 1960. But when I counted the number of people I could find on the stills and on the film, there were only 22. So I'm not sure what happened to the other 20, but there were said to be 42 in the group.
In the late 60s and 70s, things were changing fast in Naha. Loggers were moving in, roads being cut, and also other Maya arrived from other parts of Mexico, fleeing political troubles and violence, and looking to carve out a place for themselves in the jungle. In the 1970s, the government handed over title of 600,000 acres of forest to the Lacandon.
The government decides that it's going to negotiate only with the direct descendants of the Mayans, the Lacandon.
By then, the Lacandon represented only about 6% of the indigenous people living in the jungle.
Now, why does the government do this thing, this negotiating with a minority group who has also never been in contact with or had experience in negotiations with governments? Well, because there were certain interests behind all this.
Vinieron otras gente de empresas de Cofolasa.
In 1979, a company named Cofolasa went to cut all the mahogany trees.
Es como un 300 árboles.
They took around 300 trees from Naha.
De Naha.
When it happened, the young and old people had no idea. They didn't think too much about it when this started. Later, they regretted it, because now we have no more mahogany trees. What are we going to do? It was our own fault for giving the permission for cutting, taking away, and selling the trees. They barely paid for the rights. After it happened, the people started to think and became very sad.
What the government negotiates with the Lacandon is that they will get paid approximately 250 pesos per cubic meter of wood. But the government, or rather the managers of these companies, price it at 8,000 pesos.
Despite the logging, for a time family life went on as before in the small village beside Lake Naha.
Everything used to be very calm when I was living with my mother. We worked, we did everything. We made tortillas. I think that was very good. We had chickens, we had corn, and everything.
Tengo gallina, todo, hacemos todo, cuidamos gallina, hacemos maíz. Ahora cambia mucho.
Now it all has changed, and everything is different.
Ya no es igual. Así como antes, como mi suegro,
It is not the same as before. My father-in-law, old Chan Kin, used to have 3 wives. That's the way it was. They had 3 women. They wouldn't get mad at each other. It was good. If the children arrived, they all had food. Each of the wives had 2 or 3 children, and they all had their food. They were all happy in the fields.
But the intrusion of other groups and resulting interaction brought new infections and disease. The village water was contaminated, and Chan Keen moved the families to the far side of the lake, where there was a fresh flowing stream and proximity to the new airstrip.
When I was preparing the photographs to take back to the Lacandon, I had long been intrigued by a little face peeking over one of the wives of the spiritual leader, Chan King Viejo. Did she survive to the age of 5 and receive a name? Until the age of 5, they were all called Ok, little one. I want to know what happened to her, and I want to know what has happened to all the peoples of Naha.
On her way to Naha, Shendra followed her husband's footsteps and stopped to see the ancient Mayan ruins at Palenque.
Well, arriving at Palenque, to put it mildly, was a culture shock. I have never seen so much commercialism. It was just so different from the way it must have been when Colin and Arthur arrived in 1960. I was a little shocked, perhaps a little disappointed. I don't know why I think things should stay the same. I was surprised to see the Lacandon out in the commercial world. And yet at the same time, it would be normal. Civilization hit them 26 years ago. They would have definitely spread and found their way around and would sell. When my husband came to these marvelous ruins with Arthur, there was only one other person there. And these 3 had these marvelous ruins all to themselves, and it must have been magical. Nothing really spoils those wonderful ruins. They stand in their own energy. They cannot be displaced by the ants crawling all over them. I came up these steps, one at a time, straight forward. But legend has it that the Maya temples were built so that you could only descend sideways and slowly, so you did not turn your back on the gods. I wonder if the Lacandon Maya have turned their backs on their gods.
My father didn't have any doubts about the force God could have. He told me there was only one God, that he believed in that one God, that one God was everything. When he died, he asked me if I was fine and told me why I should believe, but that it was up to me.
I am an old man. None of my children learn my songs. Nor will my grandchildren learn them. It's all right whether they learn them or not. They will probably send their souls to Jesus Christ. They say they won't burn when they die. Say it's not true.
About 6 years ago, some people started to change to Christians, evangelists. They are abandoning their traditions one by one. Some people say that God gave us the earth to finish it, but it is not true. God gave it to us so we do things with it, not destroy it. That's why I paint waterfalls and trees and branches and flowers and stones. These are the most important things the world gave us. The water gives us life. It is very important. And the jungle is very important as well. Everything comes to the forest, the lungs of the world, and gives us air, wind, oxygen without any pollution. And that's why it is still peaceful here in the jungle.
On the drive in, there was so much devastation. Although civilized, there were fincas, ranches. But then I thought of my husband, Colin, and his friend Arthur, who were here when this was totally forest, and it took days to go through the jungle to find the Lago Naha. And I thought it would break their hearts if they could see this now.
Kayum explains it's not just the logging companies that devastate the forest.
The biggest threats are the invasions, the problems of invasion, and the cutting of the trees.
These indigenous groups that arrive to settle are displaced indigenous people who have come to this region looking for a refuge area where they can live. They don't have money to buy lands, they don't have money to pay for services, and therefore they have to find a place where they can survive.
A cow needs 1 acre. If they have more than 1 cow, where are they going to plant the grass for them? So even if this is a precious land with many beautiful woods and trees they were given by God, it is still being threatened. I wish this does not continue. I don't want it to happen again. Hachakyum ordered us to not allow this, to take control. We, the Hachwinik, take half of an acre for planting. We take good care of the land. We burn it, and then we clean it to plant corn, beans, pumpkin, chayote, chilies, bananas, macal, yuca, and sweet potato.
Motes. Entonces todo en su milpa.
The land produces for 3 or 5 or 6 years. Then we look for another similar piece of land so that we can let the soil rest. And we do the same on the new one. We do not have pork or cattle. We have chickens, because chickens don't destroy the jungle.
Unlike the Lacandon, new indigenous groups coming into the forest have lost their traditional agricultural methods.
The Tzaltales and Tzotziles were forced to work in the coffee fields, for example, in estates. Or they had to work for other landowners who had different farming, seeding methods.
It's a huge problem now because there's no more land and still more people come.
Shendra and her interpreter, Irene, are on the final leg of their journey to Naha and arrive at the entrance to the nature reserve, the last remnants of the rainforest.
Irene, what does that say?
The preservation of the natural resources requires the participation of all.
It's not a large area, is it? There's very little left of the forest, as far as I can see. It was quite overwhelming. I felt a rising excitement. I thought, my gosh, I'm almost there. I wonder who'll be there, if the people that I hope will be there will still be alive. And then far off, we were on a little bit of a hill. Far off, I could see the lake, and I thought, that has to be Lake Naha. And then we trundled into the village, and everything began, all the excitement.
¿Cómo están?
Oh, muy bien.
Aquí están.
¿Sí?
Calle Martero.
Tranquila, Antonio, muchas. Sí, encantado. Sí, sí, muchas fotos, sí. Sí.
I showed this photograph to Caillou Marsh. He said, that's mi hermana, my sister. And I said, oh, where is she now? Oh, he said, oh, she's dead. She was married very young, and she was married to the lovely chap who was smoking the cigar. She was married to him at around 13 and became pregnant. She died during childbirth.
The Lacandon Maya have been gentling on my mind for many decades, since I've known Colin. So in a way, this is a pilgrimage for me. Colin was part of their world nearly 50 years ago, and things are sort of the same, yet they're not the same. When Colin passed away, this was my goal, to return to find the group. And so part of me is just bubbling inside with, wow, I'm here. They've come through a huge transition in just one generation. I'm wondering if the secret of their survival is their innate ability to flow with change. I was fortunate enough to be introduced to the widows of Chanquin Viejo, Co 2 and Co 3. I had the feeling that had I met them in 1960, I'd have been received with the same grace and calm. These two lovely shining ladies seemed comfortable in themselves, no matter how their world had changed. Neither of them spoke Spanish, but Arturo was there to translate the Lacandon into Spanish for Irene so she could tell me what they were saying.
Before, they used to be self-sufficient because there were no goods in the community. There was no one to sell things, and there was no highway to get out to the city. People used their hands more, did the work personally. Now the youth here are not the same. They keep forgetting. The only thing they carry with them is the language and the dressing tradition. And even that, most of the young boys and girls have changed their dresses.
Joaquin is one of these young Lacandon, trying to find a way to bridge the gap between past and present.
It
is sad. We don't have the same traditions anymore. Many young men want cars, motorcycles, bicycles, all that. And the traditions slowly vanish. Before, the tradition was to go hunting with bows and arrows, make ropes. The ropes we wear now are not really original. The original ones come from the bark of a tree. Young people don't know that. We have Sky Television now. It is not the same, and everything has changed.
Porque nosotros vamos viendo lo que hay ahora, televisiones. Entonces ya la gente empieza uno a captarse.
We see what's happening now because of television. We are aware of what's going on. I don't think that is a problem if you use it to have knowledge. We will never travel to other countries, so I think it's okay to learn, but not to forget the traditions. We must continue the same as we were before.
Sino que hay que seguir lo mismo como antes. Platicarles. Es como yo a mis hijos les tengo que decir.
We must talk to our children and let them know that television is not the way to get lost, but to know more.
Perderse. Es para conocer.
The school covers all ages, all the different grades. They're all taught in Spanish. The only Lacandon they hear is in their own homes. But among young adults, I met Elias, who is writing a dictionary of the Lacandon language.
I think that even though my hair is short, I want to continue with my own language. I want life and tradition to keep on going, and to not forget our language. A lot of us don't know it. You can see it. They cannot write something in their own language. I hope that the kids learn to read. Even if they know Spanish, they should learn Mayan, so we are able to spell our own language. We don't know if it will be published or not. If it won't, then I will look for another way to copy it. The purpose is to know about the Mayan culture, how we write our language.
The key to keeping any culture alive is keeping the language alive. The particular form of Maya spoken by the people at Naha is going to be extremely vulnerable because of their very small population size and the intrusion of schooling and modern media.
Traveling on the lake was magical. There's a stillness and a tranquility that have to be experienced to be believed. Arturo took Irene and me to the site of the old village where we met Cayum.
Could we ask how many houses, where they were? Entonces, Cayum, ¿cuántas casas había?
Aquí había 6 casas.
There were 6 houses here. This is the house of old Chanquin. He lived in a long house with 3 wives and all the family. About 14 people.
Were they very sad when the trees came down? Was it a big shock? I mean, it was a huge change.
Cuando vinieron a cortar, nosotros como estamos medio
We
jóvenes,
were very young and didn't think much at the time.
además si entraron a estaba tumbando, pues no
We
decían,
heard the mahogany trees fall.
escuchamos está cayendo.
We were not thinking if that was good
No
or
se
bad.
imaginaba que es bueno o es malo. Ya después, en los 15 años más,
It took us 15 years to regret it. There are no more trees for cayucos or wood to make
para
houses.
tablas, para vivir hacer una casa de una tabla.
¿Sí estaba la casa de la ceremonia?
The ceremony house was right here.
Right here.
Tenían juntamente
All Mateo, all Chanquin, and Antonio had the house together. The main one was all Chanquin.
y es el tojil de todo de ahí.
He was the tojil of the family.
Entonces, vivía juntos.
They joined together at the ceremony house to have parties and celebrate together.
Each family and each community had its own god house, so this was a separate thatched roof little hut with open sides in which the god pots were kept. Women and children were not allowed in these houses, only the man of the house, the head of the household, and he would go in and he would pray to the gods of the forests. There's only one god house remaining in Naha today, and only a few of the Lacandons still use it. We were fortunate enough to be invited to watch a bolche ceremony. Bolche is made from the fermented bark of the bolche tree. It's fermented with honey in a special ceremonial cayuco, which has been dug out for this purpose. Very potent. The bolche ceremony brings the gods into focus. They would line the gods up, all in their correct order, and feed them the bolche. And then they'd light the resin and the prayers would go up with the smoke. In the past, women were allowed nowhere near this ceremony, but now we were just allowed inside the threshold of the hut, but no farther. In the old days, after the bolche ceremony, the men would stay and they would discuss affairs of the village and make decisions for everybody in the village. Women were never included. Nowadays, there's a loudspeaker calls everyone to the meeting house. Toward the end of the bolche ceremony, everything was interrupted by the loudspeaker calling all the men to the meeting room, and they left forthwith. Everything stopped, and away they went.
At the present time, we're well organized in the community and with the authorities. There are 52 comuneros and around 206 family members, including kids, women, and men. We're doing well. We have meetings and talk about what is happening. We communicate and gather together if there is a problem.
It went on and on through the afternoon and into the evening. Even our filming was suspended. Nothing more could happen until whatever it was sorted out. They would not tell us what it was about, but something major was happening. The voices grew louder and louder, and the meeting was interrupted when certain members were hauled off to jail.
If someone provokes or argues too much, they lock them up for a little bit. And that's also why we have authorities.
It was not solved that night. It was left that the meeting would be resumed at 6 o'clock the next morning. Sure enough, at 6 o'clock, the loudspeakers got everyone out of bed, and the men went to the meeting hall. The chaps who had been sent to jail were invited to join the meeting again because now they had calmed down. The women were hovering around. There's been great anxiety among the women.
Que a veces muy difícil para solucionar en un día.
Sometimes it is very hard to solve things on one day because everyone gets heated and it goes nowhere.
Solucionar las cosas. Entonces tiene que esperar que se calmara para más tranquilo.
We have to wait and cool down so we can understand each other. If not, any little thing or misunderstanding gets people angry.
Entonces la gente se pone encima de todo. Entonces, y tiene que controlarlo.
And we must control ourselves in order to understand. That's why there is discussion about everything. But then it gets solved, and there is no more problem, and that's it.
By noon, the doors opened, and the Lacandon came out, and they were calm, and they were smiling. Obviously, a resolution that was acceptable for all had been reached, and we never did find out what it was all about. Toward the end of our week's visit to Nahar, the opportunity came to return the gifts that they'd given to Colin and to let them know we had held their memories sacred over all the years. I thought maybe the young people wouldn't be interested, but they were fascinated. They said, "You have given us back our past," and that meant everything to me.
Entonces hablaron que lo van a guardar para.
They will put what she brought in the new house of culture so people can see who brought the things and also see their ancestors. I think they will all be very proud of it because no one keeps the originals of their ancestors.
Nadie tiene original de pasados. La verdad es muy importante, como lo que es
All she brought is really important. The tobacco, the mazos, the arroz, everything is original. To me, it is very important because it has been a very long time and the community is very proud to see it.
Anthropology is sometimes criticized as yet another form of cultural imperialism. But anthropologists and filmmakers like Colin Hannay can provide a record of a society at a certain stage and make sure that record is available to later descendants.
This was the highlight of my visit, the chance to show them the film that Colin took of their village and of their elders in 1960. I asked permission of Arturo whether I could spread some of Colin's ashes on the lake. And so they gave permission, and Cayum and Arturo took me out in a cayuco to do this. They suggested I spread them at the edge of the water, at the foot of a tree, so that the goodness would then become part of a tree, and we found the perfect spot. For me, it was a culmination of all his dreams, mine added to it, and I felt he belonged in this area, that he was at home in the forest. And as we drew back in the cayuco, it struck me very, very hard that, yes, this was my final closure, but happily also, because it was a completion.
Time is coming to an end, according to the legend my father used to tell. He told us to take care, even if we don't believe in God.
Los árboles Es como el pulmón de la
The forests are the lungs of the world, the lung of oxygen. It gives life. It inspires us. If everyone cuts the trees, if no one cares, the world will come to an end.
Y pues es mi pregunta a mí, tal vez, ojalá que lo entiendan.
I would like them to know that it is not good to destroy the jungle. Where there is a jungle, there's water, there's rain, and poverty doesn't exist. If you know what I mean by poverty. Sometimes I say to myself that I want money, a lot of money, buy cars, TVs, and all that. I know it's wrong. What is good is to be alive.